Andy, did you catch any leprechauns, or how'd that go for you yesterday?
No, I didn't. I forgot to look for the little buggers, but were you successful in baiting them in with your honey temptations to lure them in and catch them?
So we had quite a scene, Andy.
Yeah,
We had made some wildflower stew with
nice.
some potatoes and mushrooms because that's what leprechauns like. You know, they like
Obviously.
mushroom potatoes and wildflower. So we made that stew. We also made some, and we also put some, little nuts in a bowl, not salted. Try to make it
Right.
natural.
Yeah.
And then we made some green chocolate chip cookies, Andy. And
Oh,
this is one of my favorite recipes, and it's like a
yeah.
1,000 calories a cookie, or something to that effect. We made some smaller ones for the leprechaun, but hey, he liked them. Gave a little bit of a gold chocolate surprise left over. Didn't trick us as much as he usually does. The leprechaun likes to mess things up all around the house. Not so much this year, just some like crazy decorations. And of course, they always have to pee green in the toilet, and fuck around with the milk. But, other than that, Andy, it was good. Not quite the bucket of gold. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been here this morning,
Hey,
Andy.
fair, fair. Sounds like a successful St. Patrick's Day to you. So, congratulations to you and your family on, luring him in, tempting him, getting some green pea. Sounds like a fun day, fun weekend.
Did you do any like corned beef and cabbage, Andy, for dinner or anything like that? Did you do any? I know you're not a huge St. Patrick's Day. Do you not like embark in any of it?
No, I've
Okay.
got no kids in the house here anymore. They're all they're out of the house. So, like, my wife and I aren't going to indulge in St. Patrick's Day festivities.
Okay.
But Dave, today is a special day for me. Yesterday, St. Patrick's Day, but March 18th is an anniversary. And this one is especially special. This is 20 years since I got home from Iraq today. So I,
Hey.
I always like to celebrate this day. It's especially, thank you. It's also my youngest son's conception date. We know this for a fact, right? There's certain things you know for a fact. So
Yep.
it's a special day. So yeah, so I didn't celebrate St. Patrick's Day, but I'll celebrate that 20-year anniversary.
Well, there you go, Andy. And now it's seared in my brain. Conception day for when you.
1 p.m. Around 1 p.m. today, Dave. I want you to imagine what was happening.
Well, that's always the thing, right? You come home from a long deployment, and then that's usually a thing that does occur when you have a loved one
That's
at
right.
home, waiting for you patiently as they struggle through
Yeah.
deployment. It's just yeah, it's always obviously we always think about the individual who's deployed, but obviously the family at home always goes through their own challenges and struggles and such,
Way
and that's
harder, way harder. I think we
yeah.
just run around selfishly playing soldier, and while there's great frustration in Iraq, I'll say was the worst year of my life, like without a doubt. But whatever we're going through, there's still an adventure to it, and you're doing your job, and there's an excitement to it. Whereas the family's just sitting there waiting for you. And back then, Dave, when we were young, like there wasn't the communications we have today. Families didn't know where we were as easily as they are today. So yeah, definitely, I think hats off to all the spouses and families that stayed behind and think of their loved ones while we were deployed. It's not easy. It's harder for them than it is for the service member always.
Yeah, 100% agree. I think that's you're right on point there, Andy, for sure. So, all right, Andy, a couple things to get into as we start off our week here. I'm curious, Andy, are you watching Shogun, the show Shogun on FX?
I'm not, Dave. You mentioned this a couple episodes ago. You're thinking about taking it up, and I've heard of it. It sounds interesting. I know the book because my mom had this massive tome on her bookshelf when I was growing up. Shogun, and I think it's been done as a movie or a mini series before, but I have not yet checked it out. Is it? Have you checked it out?
I have. I'm through I think it's only the first season's only 6 episodes. Disappointed. I've only watched the first four. I guess the first four have been on. They don't drop all at once like Netflix does. They do once a week, and it's quite good, Andy. It's yeah, it is based on the book. It's based on a somewhat. I think it's mostly true, right? I think a lot of the stuff that's going on, the historical fiction, whether the names are true or not, I wouldn't be able to tell. And I frankly, I don't really even care.
Yeah.
It's very Games of Thrones-ish in a lot of respects, and it brings about a part of history that I'm not overly. I mean, you're familiar with it because you know the samurai and the shogun. You know about feudal
Yeah,
Japan, but you don't really see it to this degree. And I think it's quite interesting. In fact, I forget, in the 1600s and 1700s, how big of a country around the world Portugal was, of all
yeah,
countries. I mean, you
yeah,
don't think of them. Obviously, you remember Spain, France, and England, carving up the new world, I guess, if you want to call it the new world. I mean, but the carving up the new world, and but Portugal was very much the same type of
yeah,
player in that thing. So I think it was very interesting to see. Again, it goes back to, it harpens on, you forget too, within the Christian religion, and I know this is for Ireland, this is not new or old or whatever it is, but you forget how much Catholic versus Protestant
oh my
violence
gosh, yeah, yeah,
was such a thing. I mean, we're so quick to cite Sunni versus Shia Muslim violence, but it's not like the Christian faith has been absent from any of that stuff. Catholics versus Protestants was worse
yeah,
in a lot of respects.
yeah.
So I found it to be quite interesting. I would highly recommend it, Andy.
Yeah, well, noted, noted. Maybe we'll pivot over there when we finish our current viewing activities. But I mean, Europe suffered so much bloodshed and chaos because of the interfaith violence, that plagued it for centuries. I mean, it's really the story of Europe and the kings and queens and everything else, the popes, and it's crazy. It's crazy. So yeah, for sure. And it sounds interesting, Dave. Maybe we'll check that out. So
Yeah,
thanks for the hot viewing tip.
yeah, you definitely should. What are you watching? Are you watching anything in particular?
Right now, we're midway through The Gentleman on Netflix. It's
Hmm.
Guy Ritchie's film about a
Yeah.
English Duke. It's pretty fun. It's pretty fun. Kind of, can watch it. He's got a fun way of making shows and movies, and this is a good one. It's kind of entertaining, good acting, fun storyline, quirky. It's pretty good so far.
I can't recall, when is that set? Is that current time or
Yeah, current
okay.
times, Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I've always enjoyed Guy Ritchie. I think I liked his, the what he. I think he came on with Snatch. Is that what, Snatch? And then he did the Sherlock Holmes movies, a couple of
yeah,
those,
yeah,
and then he did a couple other films. I think The Man from Uncle. He did the remake of that. I enjoyed it, even though that was panned, whatnot. But I enjoyed Guy Ritchie as well. So.
yeah. It's got a quirky sort of style that's enjoyable.
Yeah, it's that weird little action sense, the way he shoots and films. I always enjoy it.
Yeah,
Andy, of note, just on as we're talking movies or films and TV shows or whatever, Kung Fu Panda, Andy, is leading the box
yeah,
office, which is quite
yeah,
interesting. Kung Fu Panda 4 with Jack Black, I always enjoyed a little Jack Black.
yeah.
And then Dune 2 continues to rack it up. I need to go see Dune 2. And I need to see it in the theater, I think, because I guess the IMAX showing is just supposed to be unbelievable. So I need to go check that out. So
Yeah. I look forward to seeing both of those. To be honest, we raised our boys enjoying Kung Fu Panda, and we've talked about Doom before, and definitely looking forward to seeing the second one there.
are you a big Jack Black fan, Andy?
I do like him. He's just such a comedic actor. He's so goofy
Yeah.
and funny, and entertaining. I do like him. I mean, he kind of is Kung Fu Panda, right? I mean, really, that's kind of who he has been and who his roles often are. And he's good as the you know goofy madcap kind of guy, and he's just energetic, and yeah, he's fun. He's a lot of fun.
Yeah, he's got those weird, quirky things. I always enjoyed like the School of Rock. That was a
Yeah,
fun movie that he
yeah.
did. My favorite Jack Black movie of all time is Saving Silverman. If you haven't seen that one, that's a classic. You should go rent that on a night. I don't think your lovely wife would probably enjoy it as much as we would, but it is stupid comedic stuff. Steve Zahn is in that one. Good times all around. Neil Diamond, big Neil Diamond. Jason Briggs, of American Pie fame.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
fun thing. And Amanda Peet, who was a lot of people's crushes for a period of time. She had like a 5-year window where she really rolled that out. So that was That was a fun time. So, all right, Andy, anything you want to call out on TV or culture?
No, no, I'm good. I didn't know we were gonna drift into pop culture as long as we
I
did.
know.
That was fun. So I know I'm good. I'm good. Thank you
I,
though.
I I drift there where I can, Andy. So all right, Andy, another topic to get into on this Monday. Are you following any of the news around TikTok? Andy, this is something that comes up every couple years,
Yeah,
a ban on TikTok. And the reason why there's discussions on ban on TikTok is because it's a Chinese connected or Chinese adjacent application, and there's a lot of belief that the application is feeding direct information directly back into China so that they can be used for nefarious purposes and whatnot. There's a long list of data breaches over the last several years, or maybe over the last 20 years, that are all connected to China, where there's millions upon millions of credentials that have been stolen or taken as part of these data breaches. This is just another adding more to it. TikTok is shaping the minds of our young, and then they're promoting content that is meant to be some sort of information warfare against the United States. And a lot of places have taken to banning TikTok. The United
yeah,
States military, I think, has in the U.S. government has openly encouraged people not to use TikTok. A lot of countries in Europe are either have similar actions or are considering similar actions. And so there's a lot of work around there, but there's also the political side of it now too, Andy, as one, the former president used to have a particular view of TikTok, and now he's changed his mind to be supportive of TikTok.
yeah.
That's largely believed to be because one of the principal owners of it has a lot of money that could be invested into the Trump campaign, and so there's some discussions around that. That's not conspiracy theories. That's just open news. If you want to read any of that, you can see Trump's positions on TikTok over the years. So, Andy, I've tried to recap as much as I can. Any thoughts on what's going on with TikTok?
They've tons. I mean, tons of thoughts to be honest. More than the show will allow us to get into. But I mean, you called out sort of Trump's back and forth. I mean, he was adamant that it had to be banned for a while, banned or sold. Now completely taking a different tune. Uh, Joe Biden, is still pushing for a ban. So he'll sign legislation if it's passed by Congress. A month ago, the Biden campaign got onto TikTok, right? Which just highlights the hypocrisy of both of those two leading candidates and the nonsense of it. I told my family years ago as my oldest son started getting into it, I was like, hey, there are some concerns here about, what happens with your data, potential acts it might have. But it's going to be aware. We discussions about it. He enjoys it. Others enjoy it. I don't, right? And so there are some questions and concerns about TikTok. Sure, but like those are fair and legitimate. The question is then what do you do as a government with that, right? Like what do you do? And so if the US military, US government, state governments want to ban use of TikTok on, service members' devices, whether they're government issued or private, like they can make those decisions, right? But to ban it for all Americans makes no sense. And if you look at the legislation passed in the House last week, last Wednesday, it's not explicitly about TikTok. It's sort of vaguely written, could apply to any number of organizations online, giving the government a lot of power and authority to ban websites, applications, kind of willy-nilly based on pretty loose and vague criteria. And so you're seeing in the House folks that aren't considered common allies from the left and the right voted against it. A number of well-known representatives from Florida, Georgia, New York, and other states that aren't always aligned on these types of issues voted no. And that's because the legislation itself is garbage legislation that I'm guessing because most congressional bills don't get read because they're so long and boring and disgusting and they're put to the floor for a vote so fast. Most folks didn't even read the bill, right? So it's a dangerous piece of legislation because it's written so broadly and vaguely. There's opposition from both sides of the chamber, but it might still pass. So there's a lot of talk that the Senate now will slow drag on it. They won't ban it before the election. That could be an issue, could be a concern. But it just shows sort of the messiness of all of this kind of stuff, right? And you can read some of the concerns and objections. Gizmodo had a good piece on it. Robbie Suave at Reason had a good piece on it. And you can see also that there's a lot of well resourced individuals, from Mr. Wonderful to a former Secretary of the Treasury and many others, lining up to just buy TikTok. And that just makes it look even more gross, right? We're going to force the sale of a company because it's not American owned, require to be owned by an American organization. You got all these rich old white guys lining up to buy it. It just looks not right. I mean, so at multiple levels, I think there's a fail. And at the end of the day, again, Americans can be informed of concerns and then make their own decision whether they want to do their own personal data or not. I mean, that's not something you have to require force from government. It's just a kind of a, fear mongering, yucky political garbage that shows a lot of the failures of both our chief candidates for the White House and Congress. And David went on too long there, but I told you we can talk about this for a couple hours. There's just so much of a mess in it.
Well, I do think it is messy, and I think it's almost like a self-inflicted wound sometimes. Look, you can't speak out of both sides of your mouth here.
Yeah,
You can't condemn foreign countries for doing, stopping access to the internet and then telling somebody that they can't download it on their phone. I don't even know how you kind of monitor. I know the U.S. government and the military is banned it or whatnot, but I don't know how you can even monitor for that. I mean, obviously, if it's on a government issued thing, that you can clearly do that, but on your personal device, I don't know how you do that. I think the key on all of this is, and I think another key element on it is that you can ban this, but then you're going to just be you know careless and on all your other things. So like I said, it's not like this is the only thing China's doing or potentially doing against individuals to collect information and data. I mean,
right.
just look again, go back over the last 20 years and see how many of the biggest data breaches. I would say probably 75% of the biggest data breaches in the last 20 years have been connected to China. It's at least to the point where if we're going to be so worried about an application because of the content that's spewing on there, and that then that's one thing, but then you have to carry it through on all other areas, Andy. And I think that starts leading to authoritarian type of
Yeah.
policies, and what's next there, and how do you continue to do that? It's going to be very messy. And to your point, you also called out too, is yes, I mean somebody um, is calling for the ban of it and then turning around and putting a bid in to buy it. I think that that's also a lot of hypocrisy there. I personally don't care for it. I've never downloaded it onto my um, my phone in any way, shape, or form. My kids use it. Do I think that they're being manipulated somehow, one way or the other? No, and no more than Instagram would do, or any of these other Snapchat or whatever, any of the other types of things would do. So I think this is really, look, I don't agree with what goes on in TikTok necessarily, but I mean, am I here to say you shouldn't be able to have it? I don't think that's really where we need to go to. So that's just my thoughts, Andy.
Yeah, no, I agree with all that. I mean, I think there's some things like that are not good, like some of the trends and things like that, lead to some unfortunate behavior and things of that nature. And you got it right. I mean, there's a lot to be concerned about China for, right? I mean, it's stealing intellectual property on a regular basis being just one of them, right? There's a lot of things
Yeah.
that China does that are wrong, right? That businesses and individuals have to be aware of and thinking about because there are legitimate threats. I know this is the one that's going to end, Western civilization or make China the premier nation in the world. It's just not there. And there are a lot of people that really enjoy TikTok for a variety of reasons. No one's forcing anybody to use TikTok, right? You can use TikTok, you can use X, you can use Threads, you can use Instagram, you can use whatever, Facebook, whatever you want or not, right? And that's an individual choice. And there's some risk involved with it, and there's a lot of enjoyment, in different forms for the way people want to engage, and that's an individual choice. So yeah, there's a lot of nonsense in this. It's a lot of fear mongering, a lot of politicization, like always, right? Like I said, there's just buried in tons and tons of hypocrisy, and it's giving the White House a lot of power that we don't think about it sometimes, or we get concerned about a single thing like TikTok sometimes. But that power, once given, never gets ungiven, and it gives the president, whomever that person is, a lot of authority that we may not like when somebody we don't like is sitting in the White House. And so it's just a dangerous, dangerous thing. I'm hoping the Senate shoots it down. I'm not confident they will, but hopefully they'll have enough enough thought process on to say, hey, let's just pause and wait and think about this some more, and hopefully not do this.
Yeah, I think honestly, Andy, you mentioned the fear mongering. If you go back a couple months and that TikTok part about was Bin Laden right? Did he have a reason? Did he have that kind of story is going to continue to surface when you see these type of discussions about whether we should or shouldn't do. And again, it's one instance
Yeah,
a larger issue. But the fear mongering I get concerned about. And but here's the thing: in about 2 years, the TikTok's going to be replaced by something else.
yeah,
There's going to be a new application that's out there. Again, we've gone from Facebook to Twitter/X to Instagram to Snapchat to anything else out there.
yeah.
TikTok is just the latest, and for this generation, it is what it is. But for the next generation, the younger kids coming up, it'll be something different because they won't. TikTok will be the things that their parents did. So that's kind of one of those things. So. All right, Andy, anything less left on TikTok?
So we go, Dave. So we go. Where else are you taking us today?
Okay, so Andy, we kind of touched on this, and we only have a couple more minutes left here today. But I'm curious, we touched on this last week about COVID, the 4-year anniversary of the President Council using safe measures for stopping the spread, and that has continued. We still use that same messaging today. Again, congratulations, former President Trump. Well done on that part, even though you'll disavow it to this day. But well done on that part. But it got me thinking, and I saw another thing that Chick-fil-A is now working on, having these smaller hubs for you just come in and pick up your food that you order. That would not have been possible years ago.
Yeah.
And we had the drive-throughs, we had to go into the stores, and now we've had an explosion of it's like the DoorDash type of thing, but we've had the explosion of curbside. We've had the thing where you don't have to sit in the restaurant anymore to get a good meal. And that got me thinking about what have been some of the good takeaways that or evolutions from what was otherwise a very sad sad period of time and very dangerous period of time. Any thoughts on that, Andy?
Yeah, look, COVID sucked. There's a lot to be frustrated about in many respects relation to COVID, but it also, like everything, Dave. All things can come together for good, right? It's a true statement. Bad choices, mistakes, and tragedies can all there's goodness in anything if we look for it and we let that goodness come to the top and we take advantage of it. And there's a lot of good in COVID, despite all the terribleness that came along with it. And technology saved the day, right? During COVID, a lot of people were sort of turning on, Jeff Bezos and Amazon, and a lot of sort of hate directed his way because he was building his, magnificent yacht and all this other stuff. But look, Amazon was the avatar. Amazon saved the world, right? We were all locked up in our homes. We were all getting stuff delivered from Amazon, which worldwide, right? Which was a huge blessing for all of us. And now just an example of how technology really surged in many ways during COVID, in a lot of ways that are to our benefit. Zoom, Dave, right? Zoom is largely a COVID success story. And now, like, we realize, hey, we don't have to always drive to meetings. We can hop on a Zoom, save time, still have a very effective conversation, do a lot of work that way. Many organizations have made the leap to being much more telework friendly, which opens up the candidacy for good employees much broader, right? You don't have to be living in New York or DC or London or San Francisco to have sometimes, these really great jobs. You can do it from afar and live wherever you want to live and still contribute to great organizations and doing, great jobs. Things like Slack, right? It grew, through COVID and took on a lot more prominence in businesses and organizations. Just the technology that we moved to, I think, was accelerated rapidly during COVID, and all those things, just like back to the touchless, contactless delivery and the Chick-fil-A example you gave. while those have been disruptive in some senses and they've affected some jobs and there's transitions as part of technology always, but there's been I mean, just a super fast transition in a positive direction in a lot of ways because of technology that largely came out of COVID. So yeah, even though it sucked, there's a lot of goodness that did come out of it, and I think we should appreciate that.
Yeah, I think it forced us in so many different ways to consider what those old challenge the old status quo, right? I mean,
Yeah,
you mentioned about, remote working or in-office expectations and such. I mean, the commercial real estate market right now, Andy, is going through a real challenging time because these companies have built in the middle of cities
yeah,
or have rented out these huge buildings because they expect people to be in the office. Now they're at half capacity, and now there's a lot of groups that are looking to get out from underneath those things. So, what does that mean for the downtown environments and of these urban areas? It's going to be very interesting over the next several years. I know a lot of companies are trying to force people back into the office. Whether that's going to be long-term successful or not, I don't know. But I do
yeah,
think somebody mentioned to me at the beginning of COVID was for with regards to office work is this was a great social experiment that everyone wanted to try, but everybody was scared to do.
yeah,
And yet COVID forced them into doing that. It challenged these businesses to stay alive. They had to adapt and overcome. They had to build out these infrastructures. And you talked about Zoom and Slack and some of these other platforms that have emerged out of those. They may have been existing prior to COVID, but they really exploded for that in-office collaboration type of work that wasn't before possible when you worked at home. And so yeah, I think it's been very interesting. And again, we can always hope too that we go back and take some of the lessons learned about preparedness,
yeah.
government preparedness, and try to do better on that front. And so that it's not the same as last time. But I do think a lot of goodness came out of it, despite all the death and all the unfortunate news that also emerged. So it will be interesting to see how it plays out over the next several years, Andy. So
Yeah, for sure. And there's still a lot more that you touch on the whole, government, improvement process. There's a lot to look at there because we haven't learned, I don't think, everything we should have learned out of it because it became so political. And there's a lot of things to look at and sort of criticize anybody that's an elected official at the national level about because they haven't really pursued some of this better. But while there's a lot of frustration, certainly COVID brought a lot of misery. Yeah, I think it's good to recognize these positives, Dave. I think it's an important thing to recognize and appreciate.
yeah,
Somebody used to spend 3 hours a day commuting for many years of my life. Like, what a blessing it is to not have to do that, right? And I think a lot of people experience that during COVID. They're like, I'm not going back to the office and dealing with 2-3 hour commutes. In my life, I'm losing time every day. It's just, I think there's a lot of goodness in it.
yeah, and I think to that flip side too, businesses can also say, "Hey, if you're not spending 2 to 3 hours in a car every day, then you
Yeah,
could be spending 2 to 3 hours
at work.
working more at work." So there's a lot of things to be on that front. So, all right, Andy, I think that puts a little bow on our day, Monday. Good little topics of conversation today,
Yeah,
Andy.
yeah, yeah. Dave, can I start real quick? I mean,
Yeah.
I did football Friday, but hey, exciting free agency action. Russell Wilson and Justin Fields are now Pittsburgh Steelers. Exciting to see. And I know I've been harping on the Black Crows and some of their individual songs. They dropped their new album Friday. It's almost 40 minutes of just awesome rock and roll, really fun. And Bon Jovi also released a new track. And for those who grew up with Bon Jovi, exciting to see those guys still rocking and hopefully coming back out on tour. So a lot of Friday and weekend excitement in music and sports and otherwise.
Whoa, living on a
Oh yeah,
prayer.
oh
And,
yeah,
yeah.
oh yeah,
And NCAA tournament comes out this
yeah.
week. Are you gonna follow this year?
I mean, I kind of been half paying attention the last few years. I haven't really gotten too caught up in it, and in a lot of pools or anything. But I'll watch. It's always fun to see, especially to see the upsets and everything. So I kind of passively pay attention to it. I'm not a huge college basketball guy anymore. I used to love it, but now it's just sort of it's not as close to me as it used to be. How about you, Dave? Are you cheering for somebody? Is there a likely
I
tournament team that you're excited about?
I don't. I mean, I don't follow it anywhere near as much. I keep interested of who the top teams are. I
Yeah,
couldn't tell you who any of the top players are like I used to, but I do enjoy, and I will be most likely working home Thursday and Friday this week, but I do enjoy having that on in the background as I'm doing work and being able to look over at
yeah,
the tournament games and be able to see, those there's always the excitement of that. For the first weekend at least,
yeah.
you get those exciting 5-12, 6-11 matchups or whatever that just make for exciting games. And who knows, a number 2 or 3 seed will almost always falls out. So yeah, I don't watch it as much as I used to, college basketball during the year, but this is always a fun time of year.
I
So
agree. Agree.
yep. All right, Andy. Well, that's put a little bow on that. We can maybe revisit some of this stuff on Wednesday, but until then, Andy, I will catch up with you next time.